welcome back to Spinning Iris. It is day 25 of Banned Book Month, which means it is time for chapter 25 of Candide by Voltaire. In the last chapter, Candide was reunited with a long-lost member of the Thunderten-Trunk household, and now he and Martin are on their way to meet a Venetian nobleman who apparently has never known any trouble or sorrow. Let's find out what he's like. Are you ready? Let's go. Chapter 25. A visit to Signor Pococurante, Venetian nobleman. Candide and Martin got into a gondola which took them down the Brenta to the palace of the noble Pococurante. The gardens were well laid out and adorned with beautiful marble statues, and the palace was an architectural triumph. The master of the house, a wealthy man in his early 60s, received his two visitors with great courtesy but very little enthusiasm, which disconcerted Candide and did not displease Martin. Two pretty, well-dressed girls served them with cups of frothy chocolate. Candide could not help praising their beauty, graciousness, and dexterity. "They're rather pleasant girls," said Senator Pococurante. "I sometimes take them to bed with me, because I'm tired of the ladies of this city, with their coquettishness, jealousy, quarrels, moods, pettiness, pride, and foolishness, as well as the sonnets you have to write or have written for them. But those two girls are beginning to bore me too." Later, as they were strolling down a long gallery, Candide was surprised by the beauty of the pictures he saw. He asked which master had painted the first two. "They're by Raphael," said the senator. "I paid a high price for them several years ago, out of vanity. They're said to be two of the finest paintings in Italy, but I don't like them at all. The colors are too dark, the figures aren't well shaded, and don't stand out enough, and the draperies don't look at all like cloth. In short, no matter what anyone may say, I find no true imitation of nature in them. I'll like a painting only if it makes me think I'm seeing nature itself, but there are no such paintings. I have many pictures, but I no longer look at them." Pococurante had a concerto performed before dinner. Candide found the music delightful. "That noise may be amusing for half an hour," said Pococurante, "but if it lasts any longer it bores everyone, although no one dares to admit it. Music nowadays is nothing but the art of composing and performing difficult pieces, and things that are merely difficult never give lasting pleasure. I might like opera more if they hadn't managed to make it into a monstrosity that revolts me. Anyone who wants to can go to see bad tragedies set to music, in which the scenes are written only to give flimsy pretexts for 2 or 3 wretched songs that show off some actress's windpipe. I have nothing against those who are willing or able to swoon with pleasure when they see a eunuch warbling the part of Caesar or Cato, and moving awkwardly around the stage. But for my part, I've long since given up such pitiful nonsense which is now the glory of Italy, and for which sovereigns pay such large sums." Candide argued a little, but with discretion. Martin agreed with the senator wholeheartedly. They sat down to table. Then, after an excellent dinner, they went into the library. Candide saw a magnificently bound Homer and complimented the illustrious nobleman on his good taste. "Here's a book," he said, "that used to delight the great Pangloss, the best philosopher in Germany." "It doesn't delight me," said Pococurante coldly. "I was once made to believe that I enjoyed reading it, but that constant repetition of combats that are all alike, those gods who are always active but never do anything decisive, that Helen who's the cause of the war but almost never appears in the story, that Troy which is forever besieged but never taken, all those things bored me to tears. I've sometimes asked learned men if they found the book as boring as I do. Those who were sincere all admitted that it put them to sleep whenever they tried to read it, but said that a man must always have it in his library as a relic of antiquity, like those rusty coins that can't be placed in circulation." "Your Excellency must have a different opinion of Virgil," said Candide. "I admit," said Pococurante, "that the 2nd, 4th, and 6th books of his Aeneid are excellent, but as for his pious Aeneas, his stalwart Cloanthes, his faithful Achates, his little Ascanius, his idiotic King Latinus, his vulgar Amata, and his insipid Lavinia, I can't think of anything colder or more unpleasant. I prefer Tasso and Ariosto's cock-and-bull stories." "May I take the liberty of asking you, sir," said Candide, "if you take pleasure in reading Horace?" "He wrote a number of maxims which a man of the world can put to good use," said Pococurante. and the fact that they're expressed in lively verse makes them easier to remember. But I care very little for his journey to Brundusium, or his description of a bad dinner, or his uncouth quarrel between a man named something like Populus, whose words he says were full of pus, and another man whose words were vinegar. I read with extreme distaste his coarse verses against old women and witches, and I don't see what merit there can be in telling his friend Maecenas that if he places him in the ranks of lyric poets, he'll strike his sublime forehead against the stars. Fools admire everything in a celebrated author. I read only for myself, and I like only what suits me personally. Candide, who had been brought up never to judge anything for himself, was astonished by what he was hearing. Martin found Pococarante's way of thinking quite sensible. "Oh, here's a Cicero," said Candide. "Surely you never tire of reading that great man?" "I never read him," replied the Venetian. "What does it matter to me that he pleaded for Rabirius and Cluentius? I have enough cases of my own to judge. His philosophical works would have suited me better, but when I saw that he doubted everything, I concluded that I knew as much as he did, and that I didn't need anyone's help to be ignorant." "Ah, here are 80 volumes of the Proceedings of a Scientific Academy," exclaimed Martin. "There may be something good in them." "There would be," said Pococurante, "if only one of the authors of that hodgepodge had invented even the art of making pins. But in all those books there are nothing but vain systems and not one useful thing." "Look at all those plays," said Candide, "in Italian, Spanish, French." "Yes," said the senator, "there are 3,000 of them, and not 3 dozen good ones. As for those collections of sonnets, which altogether are not worth 1 page of Seneca, and all those fat volumes of theology, I'm sure you can understand why they're never opened by me or anyone else." Martin saw some shelves filled with English books. "I think," he said, "that any republican would enjoy reading most of those works written with so much freedom." "Yes," replied Pococurante, "it's a fine thing to write what you believe. It's the privilege of man. In Italy we write only things we don't really believe. Those who live in the country of the Caesars and the Antonines don't dare to have an idea without the permission of a Dominican. I'd have a high regard for the freedom that inspires the English thinkers, if everything admirable in that precious freedom weren't corrupted by passion and party spirit." Candide noticed a Milton, and asked the senator if he regarded that author as a great man. "Who?" said Pococurante. "That barbarian who makes a long commentary on the first chapter of Genesis in 10 books of rough verse? That crude imitator of the Greeks, who disfigures the creation, and who, instead of representing the eternal being creating the universe with his words, makes the Messiah take a big compass from the cupboard of heaven to draw up a plan of his work? Do you expect me to admire a man who spoils Tasso's hell and devil, who disguises Lucifer sometimes as a toad and sometimes as a pygmy, who make him say the same things over and over again, who makes him argue about theology, who seriously imitates Ariosto's comic invention of firearms, and makes the devil's fire cannons in heaven? Neither I nor anyone else in Italy could enjoy those pitiful absurdities. The marriage of sin and death, and the snakes which sin gives birth to, are enough to sicken a man with any delicacy of taste. And his long description of a hospital would please only a gravedigger. That obscure, grotesque, and disgusting poem was despised at its birth. I now treat it as it was treated in its own country by its author's contemporaries. Furthermore, I always say what I think, and I don't care whether others agree with me or not." Candide was distressed by these statements. He respected Homer, and had some liking for Milton. "Alas," he whispered to Martin, "I'm afraid this man may have utter contempt for our German poets." "There wouldn't be much harm in that," said Martin. "Oh, what a superior man," said Candide under his breath. "What a great genius this Pococurante is! Nothing can please him." When they had thus gone over all of Pococurante's books, they went downstairs to the garden. Candide praised all its beauties. "I know of nothing in such bad taste," said the master of the house. "There's nothing here but worthless trifles. But tomorrow I'm going to have work begun on a more nobly designed garden." When the 2 visitors had taken leave of his Excellency, Candide said to Martin, "Well, you'll have to admit that there's the happiest man alive, because he's above everything he owns." "Can't you see," said Martin, "that he's disgusted with everything he owns? As Plato said long ago, the best stomachs are not those which reject all foods." "But," said Candide, "isn't there pleasure in criticizing everything? in being aware of defects where other men see beauties." "Do you mean," said Martin, "that there's pleasure in having no pleasure?" "I suppose not," said Candide. "In that case, I'll be the only happy man in the world when I see Lady Cunegonde again." "It's always good to hope," said Martin. Days and weeks went by, however, and Cacambo did not come. Candide was so deeply immersed in his sorrow that it did not occur to him that Paquette and Brother Giroflée had never even returned to thank him. That is the end of chapter 25. So, wow. Pococurante is a miserable man. Seems like everyone in Venice is miserable. Well, hopefully the next chapter will have a little bit more fun. Hope you'll join me then. Take care. Bye-bye.